as many wonderful things as possible about all these people. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation about writing from the personal experience. And this is a conversation that is existing between Flux artists and Bay Area Playwrights Festival and the Playwrights Foundation, of which I believe all of us are a part of, and we all have different relationships to Flux as well. So I'm Johnny G. Lloyd. I am a Bay Area Playwrights Festival artist from 2021. It's wonderful to be in the room with so many fantastic people. I am also the artistic director at the Tank, which is a space in Midtown Manhattan that is for emerging artists. And I was also part of the selection committee for Fear and Wonder when Fear and Wonder was selected for Bay Area Playwrights Festival. So it's amazing to see a project start off and you read it for a festival and then it becomes something that is so excellently realized in the space. So thank you for that. Yes, please clap. Please clap. So we're here to talk today about what it means to take personal experience and turn that into art, right? So I'm here with a series of wonderful artists who have a lot of experience doing that and finding those intersections between autobiography and fiction. And we'll talk a lot about not only their process, but about the beauty of creating work that is so personal and how to navigate that as you move through the creation process. But first, we should introduce everyone. So first, we're going to introduce our fantastic playwright of the day, Tseng, who is a writer, artist, and a coder creating experiences that blend technology with imagination. Is there anything else that you want to share with folks right now? Introduce yourself.
Hi,
it's a real introduction.
Hi, I'm Jason. I use they, them pronouns. I wrote this wonderful-ish play, and I'm so thankful for y'all to be here. And it's really been a long journey. Starting, I think the first draft was like in 2019, and now we're here. So wow.
The life of a play.
Yeah.
The nice six-year-long life of a play. Wonderful. Next up, we have Corinna Schulenburg, who is an artist and activist committed to ensemble practice and social justice. And could you talk to us about your relationship with Bay Area Playwrights Festival and Flux Ensemble?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Corinna Schulenburg, she, her pronouns. My play, Riding the Bull, in 2002, if you can cast your mind back that far, was a part of the Bay Area Playwrights Festival, where it was transformed into the play it became. That play was offered a production at Theater for a New City, and the stipulation was that I would need to help produce it, which I had never done. So I reached out to an ensemble of people that I trusted. That production of Riding the Bull was really the proto-Flux theater ensemble. So we are very much here in some ways because of that transformative experience of Riding the Bull at Bay Area Playwrights Festival almost a quarter century ago. And what is so beautiful is the relationship between those two companies has continued, not just with Fear and Wonder, but getting to work with Greg last year on this beautiful elephant play by Kelly O'Donnell. And also the year that I was there was also when Liz Duffy Adams' play Dog Act was also a part of the festival, which Flux produced and was really a hinge point for us, kind of brought us into a new place artistically. I could go on, but there are two other amazing playwrights here, so I'll stop.
And there will be more talking soon. Next up is Iraisa Ann Reilly, who is a, oh my gosh, my notes, writer, performer, and educator, originally from New Jersey, but now in New York. And can you talk about your relationship to the two institutions?
Sure, I just heard a shout out to Jersey. So
yes, Jersey, we love it.
I wanted to uplift it. So I was part of Bay Area Playwrights Festival 2022 with my play Saturday Morning Cartoons, and I was the selection advisor for the following year, where we read Fear and Wonder. So it's super exciting to be here and to see something that was on paper fully realized and brought to life. And, just remembering the conversations that everybody had about how much this play was touching their lives, and to see that it now has the opportunity to get out there and for people to experience it. And this is my first interaction with Flux, and I'm super excited to be part of this. So thank you.
Great. And then pass it over to Greg Nanni. Greg Nanni is a playwright, comic book writer, and solo performer, digital creator. Ooh, there's so much stuff. Freelance marketer, dramaturg, and educator. And we went to grad school together. Greg, is there anything else you'd like to share? And could you talk about your relationship with Bay Area Playwrights Festival and Flux?
No, I think you said my resume, which is great. Bay Area Playwrights Festival this year, 2026, with Suicide Cowboys. So that's a connection to there. But last year, as was said, I got the chance to work on Elephants with Flux Theater Ensemble. And it was an amazing week-long experience where we created a 45-minute piece just through devising and shaping. And it was a beautiful time. And I don't know, I'm keep talking about that show to people. So yeah.
Wonderful. So our first question is to really kind of set the stage. I'd love it if all of you could talk about how the personal shows up in your writing. Where does it show up, and how do you begin the process of using that? And Jason, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it actually took me a really long time to write from the personal, because I when I first started writing plays 13 years ago, I just kind of took a gander at the American theater, and I didn't see me on stage, so I just rationalized if I'm going to write stories, I have to write through kind of metaphor. And so I was writing a lot of the genre stuff, sci-fi, fantasy, kind of the way that Star Trek is super queer without actually being queer. And so I did that for a while, and I wasn't getting a lot of traction. And then this play kind of rocketed out of me after kind of a experience seeing Choir Boy on Broadway. And I was like, oh, there's a version of the story in me. And I had never seen a play that kind of hit me so close to home. And I was like, well, if he did it, then maybe I can do it. And now it feels like every play that I'm writing now, I can't stop inserting myself into. I always used to really dislike it when I would see a character named Playwright into the play, and now I have I think 3 plays where I've inserted myself into the play. So I think so that's been interesting.
Corinna, I think it's your turn.
All right, we're going in order.
For now.
Yeah, I think that what I will say about that is these are the materials that we have, our bodies, our lives, our communities. And for me, what is interesting, I think, is the ways in which, because I transitioned later in life, so much of my personal experience had this kind of gravitational, unseen presence in my work that now, looking back, it's oh, girl. Sometimes writing very, very explicitly about the experience of gender, but always implicitly. And I think that it is sort of like a black hole, that kind of compartmentalized self that the plays revolved around for a time, and you feel it, but you can't see it. And so I think that, and since that time I have written plays that are more obviously autobiographical, but I think there's something to be said for the presence of absence. That there's really no way around, that there's always some things you're holding back and some things you're sharing, and that I think we often know less about what those things are than we really want to be the case. I have a profound humility regarding self-knowledge that makes the question of biographical writing really vexed in an interesting way. I think that even if you deliberately try to write about yourself, you're going to be writing about other people. And even when you're writing about other people, you're going to be writing about yourself. And that porousness is what is interesting and exciting to me.
Can you tell me what the original question was?
Yes. How does the personal show up in your writing process, in your storytelling?
In the process, yeah. I think that when I think of like the way I was like taught to write originally, I was taught by a lot of students of Maria Irene Fornes, and my mentors like Anne Garcia Romero, Migdalia Cruz. It's like a really like spiritual way of writing. And ironically, it's like a way of writing where you can like see anything in the world and let it inspire you. But it's also like digging deep into your own life and who you are. And it's really meditative. And I think like that process, inevitably you start to pull from autobiographical emotion, even if it's not autobiographical like circumstances. And I mean, for me, I think I'm probably a pretty literal person, and it ended up being autobiographical circumstances. And I also was like growing up, I was surrounded by really great storytellers. And I was a quiet kid, and I would just listen to these stories. And I was also surrounded by people who didn't have the ability to do what I'm doing. They didn't have the means and the ability to have writing as a profession. And I think like they probably would have been. So they would have been really great professional writers. So I think I also was like collecting amazing stories around me and kind of filtering them through my point of view. And that's how I've kind of come to write autobiographically, or to pull from things and then change names. But yeah.
I guess I'll go. Since that's the last one. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, maybe. It's kind of the only reason why I do theater is because I do a lot of work with the self, and I'll say this, that so my play Suicide Cowboys is about someone who tried to die by suicide like 20 years ago, who runs into a kid who just tried to die by suicide by the river. And both of those people are very much me. But I only got comfortable in talking about depression, suicide, any of that stuff through a random residency that I got in Philadelphia when I was basically just trying to figure out if I liked doing theater, which was a pivot from another trajectory anyways. So, but in this residency, which sadly no longer exists, there was a core function of it that just said, face your fear. You were given like 4 different time processes. But the third one was face your fear. And at the time I was like, well, I don't think I ever told anyone that I tried to die by suicide. And I was like, well, it says face your fear, so I might as well face that because it makes me deeply uncomfortable to talk about it. So I did like I basically like did interviews, I think with like 20 different people, and just told them the story over and over again. They were all people who were either like, I just met them, a lot of Philadelphian artists actually, it's fun. But I either just met them or like it got closer and closer to home until I talked to my parents about it, which was an interesting conversation because it's a Catholic household, so they did not enjoy hearing of that story. But then it became a one-person show, and after I started doing the one-person show, I had people come up and they were just like, oh, like I never heard anyone talk about this way before, and I really appreciate it. And I was like, oh, like that's interesting. Something that was kind of a fear that I wanted to face then started really feeling like it had an impact on people that got across it. And also, like when I was sharing the story with all these people, it just, so many stories came out of that from other people, which I didn't realize. So it just became like a important part to me of what theater can do, which is to take something that you're very uncomfortable with and find a way to express it so that Because if there's a discomfort in it, most likely it means that we're just not talking about it nearly enough. So just to express it in case if someone needs to hear it, does happen to hear it.
I love that. I'd love to go back to something that Corinna said earlier that I'm going to butcher, but I believe in very strongly, which is she said, that when you are writing yourself, you bring other people into yourself, and when you're writing other people, you put yourself into those other people. You said it much better than I did just now. But I think it brings up a really important question for me as somebody who does not write a lot of autobiographical theater, but does feel this very strongly, right? Like you're constantly bringing in new people and you're constantly finding yourself in characters that you didn't expect, about the boundaries between people in your lives and character. And I'd love to hear from all of you about where those boundaries exist for you. Like, how do you transform a person or a situation that has happened to you, that you know, a person that you're familiar with, and how do you transition that person into character or that event into story? Where are the places that you start with that?
Should we do line again?
Now we can go in any order. We're freeing ourselves from the order.
I really resonate with that. It's funny because like I very much in at the end of the play we talk about Octavia E. Butler and her quote, "God is change," but the continuation of her line is not only is God change, but everything that you touch changes you, and everything everything you touch, you change. Everything that touches you changes you. And in that kind of porous way, I believe that like not only in like how we exist as people, as we collide with each other, there's this kind of I call it like a holy intercourse that happens where the way that we move through society and become more enmeshed with each other is this way of self-knowledge through the other. But it's funny though, because like I found that like another play that I wrote actually before Fear and Wonder is called Ghost Money. It's all about my grandmother and her experience with the Chinese Civil War. And it was interesting because I didn't know my grandmother very well. She was very private. All of her trauma she kind of kept bottled up. And the whole play is all about about that, like trying to get her to talk about her trauma. And I never got to do that in real life. And like the only way that I was able to like even have a emotional relationship with her outside of her like position as my grandmother was to like imagine myself in her place and to tell this kind of grossly inaccurate story of what it is to be a Chinese woman in the 1920s or whatever. But like that like I don't know, I don't know how to like relate to people outside of like through empathy or something. It's kind of become a problem, I think, because like now people in my life are just like waiting for like the dramaturgical like knife to fall. Like when is the next play gonna come out about me? And I'm like, oh no.
The anarchist in me demands someone speak before I do. We must break this order.
I know, I agree.
I'll do it. I'll totally help you with that. Yeah, I think it's funny because I have a solo show also that's about my hometown and a holiday celebration and all these things. And I didn't change people's names. Like I changed one name, and it was it was something negative that I had to say. So I changed that name. But everybody else, I didn't change their names. And then it was performed in the fall. It was produced in the fall. And someone from my hometown was like, "We're organizing a bus trip." Yeah. And I was like, oh no. But I was also very excited. And I think like at the end of the day, my director talked me down from a ledge, and she was like, "This is an homage to these people." Like the one negative thing you had to say, like you changed that name. And like, I think that, so that's an example of a circumstance where I did not change anything, and just kind of like prayed and hoped for the best. And what ended up happening was those folks did, to my face. And over email, felt that it was an homage and felt like, oh, like kind of thank you for not changing. You know, it was almost like I was glad I didn't change names because I was paying tribute to this event that they organized for me when I was a kid, and I realized what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So that was a circumstance where I didn't change things. I think like in the play Saturday Morning Cartoons that I did for BAPF, I was actually trying to find empathy with people I didn't agree with in certain life situations. And I think like it actually was like a moment of constantly through the development process being like, do you like this character? Because I was really mad about this without saying that. But I think it is like there is something about writing characters or writing autobiographically that actually makes you look at, you know, yourself in that situation and weigh the like, oh, what was everybody's truth in this situation, and how do I look at it from everybody's point of view, which is kind of why I do this, of like it's gives the audience a chance to look at things from another person's point of view, and me as the writer, it gave me a chance to look at things from another person's point of view.
I can go, I guess.
Well, there's one thing that what you just said kind of is causing me to resonate with, which there's like, I'm butchering every saying today, but there is a thing where sometimes, so I will sometimes steal somebody's vocal cadence when I write a character. I'll steal like the way that somebody might interact. And there is a thing that people will tell you that I do think is true, which is that people have a really hard time recognizing themselves on stage unless you really feed it to them. And I do think that there is something that is kind of beautiful in that, and allows for that homage to really like take place, because they're able to say like, oh, well, I wouldn't do that part of it. You know, like I wouldn't do exactly that thing, until you get them really locked in, and then it's like, oh, I only see myself, and that is very scary for some people.
I homage the good, and I take the emotions from the bad, and I remove the situations, because the thing that's truthful to me and to my writing is the emotional situations and layering which happens and comes forth. So usually I always like disguise, like, you know, if I think of like a thing that happened to me in life that I have a negative thought with, I'll warp it entirely, but keep the emotions there and have the steps for that. So that's kind of how I do it. But it's nice to homage the, like the person that saved my life is both homaged, I think, named directly in my solo show, but in this piece is just like labeled as a nice, like, well, not a nice guy. I think like the character's just like, and some asshole came up to me. So I guess it's not a nice homage, but that person did save my life, which is interesting.
So to answer that question of like process, I think so much of my process is shaped by being an ensemble theater artist. So I'm almost always writing for somebody, and oftentimes I'm writing for somebody who's not yet a part of the ensemble. But then I hear them read the part. I'm like, oh, here you are, you know? And that kind of work, it means the personal is sort of in between us. It's them and me, and it's us, kind of simultaneously. And I think that sometimes that work is about witnessing something that was difficult, and then it does require a certain degree of specificity. Because if you change it too much, it can feel like a betrayal. And then sometimes the liberatory thing is actually something wildly different, that has a seed of lived experience. And you need that kind of wild play to be the pathway to freedom. And the only way to really know is to talk about it, you know, because I think that as a playwright who is also an actor, I know what it feels like to, in my body, play something that doesn't feel like it is freeing me, and it doesn't feel good. You know? And so I think part of Flux's core values of an aesthetic of liberation, and part of my like personal, is like I always want it to feel like it is moving us toward freedom. And it is that beautiful spectrum of absolute, specific, that shit actually happened, witness it, to now I am a princess vampire elf riding a pony, and the seed of that is still there, but it's freeing in a different way.
Just a word of caution to anyone who's looking to write autobiographically. For this play specifically, in the characters of Ryan and Jabez, I felt like it was only through a lot of therapy that I was able to like imbue kind of Jabez with all of like my faults, all of like my vices, all of my ADHD avoidance and like all that jazz, my selfishness. And then like in Ryan, I was putting in all of like these good traits that I had that I feel like I have. But then it's a very stark mirror when you're in a table read, and then the actors are doing character studies on you, and they're like, oh yeah, Jabez is really selfish and like a really kind of a terrible person. And I'm like, and it's hard. It is a moment, yeah.
Well, I also think that's interesting because I think often actors will be like, oh, the character that I like the most, that's you, right? And it's like, actually, it's probably the person that you like the least in the play. It's probably the bad guy. This actually takes us, I think, to a really interesting place about the difference between solo performance and group performance. Let's say, because I know a number of you have done both autobiographical solo shows and autobiographical plays that involved like larger ensembles. I'm really interested in how you have to navigate those differently. Like, what's the difference in audience experience? What's the difference in the experience of like sometimes embodying that versus seeing other people embody that?
I guess I would say like for my solo show, I always knew that I would be the one playing the character. And there were like interesting moments that we were developing it where I was like, okay, there's a narration part, and then there's a part where I play different characters from my hometown, whose names I didn't change. And there was like this moment where we talked about like what is the character of the narrator to like not be me the whole time. And then just performing it, it was like I have to be me. Like I had to be me telling the story, and then be characters. And yeah, and other plays that I've done where I've done like circumstances, I've definitely done the thing of like keeping the emotion but changing the circumstance. Or I think I would probably, like, I think of Saturday morning cartoons, somebody asked me if I would play one of the characters in that play, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, there's no way I could do something that, like, I wouldn't want to play that character that's that, I guess, emotionally close to reality. Even though my solo show does have a lot of close emotional reality, it's just like, I don't know. Maybe that's something for me to go to therapy about. But yeah, I think there's also, you need a separation in some way, right? Like you have to have a separation in some way in both ways you're writing it. And I think in both processes, there's like the reminder that some things you can keep for yourself. I think that's always been like an important part as I like write things of, oh, like maybe we don't need that story. Maybe that one's for me. Has always been like an important part of writing autobiographically, I think. Yeah. And then I think the other part of that I don't know if is in your question is, it was posed to me like a week ago, like, oh, when would you have somebody else do your solo show? And I was like, I don't know. I never thought about it. But now that you say it, yeah, I think that it would be like I have like a definitive goal before I would like hand it off to someone, and it might be years and years and years, if ever, I think. Yeah. I keep doing this to you.
Does anyone else have a solo? I can talk again. The line.
The line.
It continues. Yeah, I think that solo work for me continues to go from a place of, and it's like I think it's the worst practice to ever do, but it comes from a place of like, what are you afraid of? Just because I had a very cathartic experience doing the first one. So usually I'm always like, with every play, it usually stems from something that I'm deeply upset about or deeply uncomfortable with, and that's kind of the emotion or the idea that I explore throughout the whole piece. But with a solo show, it's something that I'm deeply afraid of. And so like with the depression show I did, I talked about depression to a bunch of people that, I don't know, at the time I guess didn't really talk about depression. It was very scary at the time. Now it feels fine. With my other solo show, Fat, it was this idea of doing like a vaudeville act while like almost nude and just talking about what it's like to be like a big-bodied person in a world built for skinny people. And that was a very fun show to do during COVID because it was like, we had to film it in a barn that someone let me. Just really random for a very small fringe festival, but it was still like really interesting to do, and maybe I'll go back to it, but we'll see. But yeah, I think like a solo show is such a beautiful exploration when you're into it because it's just you, so you have to like make it interesting to you and like really like find a way to like keep diving like deeper and deeper in these little ways, which is why I think that like starting with like a big thing of like, I'm really like I'd be afraid to talk about this is like a great starting point because I'm like, why and how and how do I chip away at it and what do I say that could possibly make it not afraid for me.
Awesome.
It's exposure therapy.
I'd love to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions that they want to ask as well. But I also have more questions, so there's no pressure. Yes. For those of you on live stream, the question is, how do you approach autobiographical work as a witness? If you are a witness, how do you write that work instead?
I had the great opportunity to be in, what is the program called? The Research and Development group with the civilians, R&D, yeah, where the civilians do a lot of documentary theater, and so I gained some skills in conducting interviews and things like that, which was completely new for me because I hadn't done that before. And with my play Ghost Money, that was about my grandmother, I tried to employ some of those tactics around, like I treated it very seriously, but I'm going to like sit people down. I'm going to engage in, like take recordings, do transcripts, keep notes. Like, it was really interesting to kind of cross-reference like people's memories of themselves against each other and find where the family myths were falling apart. But in doing that work, there came to a point where I had to let go of the fact finding and like position like my spirit kind of into the thing, or else it just felt like false. I remember when I was first trying to write it that way, it didn't have any stakes. And it wasn't until I was asking myself, like, well, why do I need to write this story, rather than, because originally like the frame of it's weird that I'm talking about a play that you didn't see, but the original frame for that play was just like kind of like like telling my grandma's story from when she was a little girl, and the very kind of Spielberg-esque kind of version of it. But then I changed the frame from like being at her deathbed, and it was like and so the reason why I needed to tell the story was because how her story was affecting me, because that was the only way that it could feel true.
The two plays that I wrote that had the most autobiographical content, each were doing very different things. The first was dealing with the loss of a friend in high school. And that was a play that ultimately, I think, was about being okay with not knowing, which is an odd kind of witnessing. You know, nobody has the details of how he died. What we have are the details of how we loved him, and they're never going to add up to why he did what he did. And that's what we need to see and be okay with, you know? And then the other one that I would describe as the most autobiographical, I think, really had to do with how to talk about this. How to, in the kind of absence of attention, as a kind of coming into young adulthood, a kind of absence of attention, as the adults in my life were very distracted by a lot of difficult things, going to prison, all sorts of things we've talked about. How to take that absence of attention and ultimately direct it back and go, but you were paying attention. I was paying attention. And that actually wasn't entirely a story of abandonment or lack of love, right? I was paying attention. And so, like, I think each autobiographical thing probably will demand a different approach. And all I can say is, you know, it's okay to not know what that is when you start. Because in both cases, I did not know. And I think it would probably be hard to write a play where I did, because then what would be the point of that?
I agree with what they said.
Same.
Yeah, I think that we've run out of time. We've really run out of time. Oh, man. I want to say thank you to this amazing panel. I'm sure that some people will still be around if you have questions afterwards. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, everyone.